Do you practice values-based spending? You probably do, but possibly never thought of it in such terms. In this episode, regular guest Shams Eldin Rogers and I discuss how to align your spending and your making with what's really important to you. Plus, Shams and I share what we think, or rather hope, our wardrobes broadcast about ourselves. This is a bumper hour-and-a-half episode, so you may want to or need to listen in instalments, but stick around a couple of minutes to begin. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 16 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hi lovely listener, are you doing all right? So a listener's fed back to me that they always use me asking that question as an opportunity to have a quick check-in with themselves. So if you don't do that already, I would like to encourage you to do so. I'm doing well, just having a little panic about how little time there is before the school summer holidays begin. We've still got 4 more Check Your Thread episodes coming up, including this one, before I take a little 2-week summer break. I want to keep this intro quite short and sweet because of the length of the rest of the episode, so I'll just share a little sustainability win. It's one that I also actually mentioned on this week's Check Your Thread newsletter. So my son had a school assembly that parents and carers were invited to this week. And whilst I was waiting for them to let us in, I took the opportunity to nip into the free school clothes cupboard. I managed to score 2 pairs of school trousers in the next size up. So that is awesome because I have a feeling that he'll be ready for that size when September rolls around. And then I can denote the ones that he's currently wearing that I bought on Vinted. So please use this as a little reminder if you have school-aged children, think about sourcing the next size up in school clothes second-hand in advance of the inevitable growth spurt. Then you won't be left in a panic having to go and get some nasty chemical-covered new school clothes from the supermarket or wherever. Anyway, rapidly switching gears, big thanks this week to Debbie for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. Big thank you, Debbie. Right, let's crack on with the episode. This is the second episode in the Finances, Sewing and Sustainability mini-series. If you've already listened to last week's episode with Laura Aldaney, you'll find that these 2 conversations cover some of the same things, but from different angles, which is super interesting. Some of what Shams and I chat about also links with the content of the Sewing When Your Wardrobe is Full episode. So if that's a part of this episode that you relate to, queue up episode 1, 2, 3 after this one if you haven't already heard it. And there's one more thing I want to mention. It's actually more of a sneaky peek and I'm really excited about it. So the tables have been turned and Shams has actually recorded a conversation for this podcast, but with her asking the questions of a different guest. That episode will be coming up after the summer in the autumn at some point. I am so happy that she'll be a guest host for the podcast. I've already heard the conversation and she did such a fantastic job and I can't wait for you to hear it in due course. So until next week, please take care of yourselves, stay hydrated and enjoy. Awesome. Hello, Shams. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm okay. I was trying to remember the last time we spoke. Was it like February or something?
I think it was February, yeah.
Yeah. You're in a whole different place than we last spoke.
Right. So some of your listeners might remember that my husband and I live in both Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and in central Vermont in the United States. And we changed houses in Vermont. So that has been a lot of what's made my life different. Another thing that's made my life different is that I retired at the end of June. So when you ask me, how do you spend your days? I'm no longer spending them as a paid professional educator. And I am spending them as a contractor of my own home. And also I've agreed to volunteer at a local school.
Oh, have you?
Mm-hmm. So the local school has a textile class. And as soon as I saw it, I just started screaming, "Oh my goodness, how can I help you?" And the lady said, "What's your background with textiles?" And I said, "I'm a textile activist. I teach people about textiles together with my collective in Toronto called Works in Progress Toronto, that I have an active Instagram page where I talk about what I've been doing. And that she said, well, which textile crafts do you know how to do? I said, sewing, knitting, embroidery, some weaving, dyeing. She says, okay, when can you come? When can you come? How can you help our school? So some of the kids, this was at an outdoor festival, and some of the students happened to be attending the festival. So the teacher said, this woman is going to come and help you all. And one of them said, oh, I see you're knitting. I wish I knew how to knit. You know, Zoe, I got that child to knit right there. You know, I'm just a knit pusher.
Anytime. You're like, let's go.
And then one of my former students, who was my student back in Michigan, happens to live in the same town.
No way.
Not completely happens to. When she decided to move to Vermont with her husband and child, she asked me, what part of Vermont should I move to? So I gave her this advice, not knowing that I myself would later move to that part of Vermont in another, year and a half.
You took your own advice.
She showed up just as I was teaching these high school students, teaching them to knit and talking to them about the history of feminism and fashion. And I was talking to them about that. And she says, wait a minute. She shows up. I said, yes, I'm doing to those kids the same thing I did to you, except they are volunteering to learn about textiles, as opposed to you all, who every time you had an economics example, we made it about sheep, or we made it about wool, and we made it about fiber. Now these people want that. And she's laughing. So we wanted it too.
Oh, that must have been so nice. That must have been kind of quite a double take for your former student as well. Like, she's still doing it.
No, she had warned me already that when I said I was going to retire, she said, there's little to no way that you're going to actually retire. You might not collect money anymore, but I'm pretty sure you won't retire. So she was just laughing and saying, yeah, this won't work. And now she got proof of it. Okay.
Good. I'm glad you're still doing the bit that you're so passionate about.
Absolutely. I try to assess what my mission is. And I know we're going to talk about that more today, about values-based spending. Spending your time is also one of your resources. And, I talk so much about our fabric is our resources. Our resources include time. And so textiles and avoiding them being wasted and how we can work with the environment, these are all things that are very important in my passion. So I can do some of that with those young people as part of my life goals. Also, helping queer youth and food justice are two of my other ones.
Amazing. Are you doing any active volunteering or anything to support those causes at the moment?
No, I'm doing more volunteering having to do with textiles still. So there's a free store in our local community.
In Vermont?
And in Vermont, right. And
cool.
It's on top of our local food co-op. So there's just a store space available for the community to use. And some community members decided to have it be a little free store. And you can leave things and take things. And those things are completely free. Volunteers come every day to sort through what's been donated and eliminate items that aren't appropriate for donation. And again, the community can just go up there and take and give. I'm volunteering to mend items that have been dropped off that aren't appropriate, that only because they need a little mending. And I also sort through some of the textiles.
Amazing. This is they're so lucky to have you because you're such a knowledgeable and passionate person. That's so nice that there's got that in your community.
Yeah. I love this central Vermont area. There's so much of this kind of environmental consciousness. One of the neighbors just sent around an invitation this morning to participate in a course with the Institute for Social Ecology on food justice and solidarity. There's so many people who think in ways that we really like to work with, so that we feel very at home. And we already had some familiarity with this area, but we feel very at home with the kind of people that live here. Of course, there are also other people who aren't necessarily as worried about these topics, but many of them are very receptive. As soon as someone brings up to them, oh, I could mend. And one of the neighbors said, my grandma used to mend our things. And I have a sewing machine. Maybe I could learn how to mend. So these kinds of either the people are already living this kind of lifestyle, or many of them are just right adjacent to it and just need a little push.
I love that. That's so good because sometimes those endeavors, such as like a free library or a free pantry or something to do with food sovereignty and stuff like that, that tends to be associated with like more metropolitan areas, doesn't it? And city centers and stuff and really densely populated places. So it's really nice to hear that there's stuff going on like that in a slightly less densely populated area as well.
Yeah, extremely less densely populated area. But I miss some of the things. Yesterday we wanted some blue thread. And I had some cotton thread. I told you that I've been moving toward cotton and trying to have no polyester. But for this application of making curtains for the guest cabin, my friend believed that the polyester would be more UV resistant.
Right.
So she went out looking for thread, and she looked in 2 different municipalities. Each one's a half hour from here. And she didn't find any blue polyester thread. She went to a sewing store. It didn't have. She went to another sewing store. It had been victim of the July 10th flood. So the Joanne factory was empty. Nothing because of the flood.
Wow.
Even though the internet says it's open, it's not.
Yeah.
And then she even went to little dollar stores, which are kind of in rural America. That's something that a lot of people will go to and use. And there just wasn't navy blue polyester thread within an hour in each direction. Wow. So it is very, very rural.
So, so values-based spending, because you are really living it right now, aren't you, in your current situation with your new home that previously, am I right in thinking it wasn't occupied for a while, or at least it's very much been in need of updating, hasn't it?
So the husband and wife bought this house in the early 90s. It's an 1850 farmhouse in Vermont, and it was sitting up on granite piers, which is a common way to build foundations back then. So in other words, it was just sitting on these entirely huge tons of granite. So in 1993, they built a new foundation and moved the house onto it.
Wow.
And they set up a lot of renovations, such as new electric and new plumbing, but they did a lot of it themselves, or the husband did it. Did a lot of that right, but some of it not all the way. So how it has been neglected is that, they were a middle-aged couple when they bought it, just as we are. They had about 20 years living in it together, and the husband passed away, and then the lady has been in care here in the house for another 10 years. So they weren't able to do the kinds of repairs that anybody would do. And in addition, some of the repairs that they had planned from the beginning, and we see plans, I found plans in the house of them getting ready to, age and health just caught up with them, and they weren't able to finish them. So I'd like to have kudos to them for saving this old house and doing everything they did do. And they were quite an eclectic couple. So they lived a lifestyle very similar to ours in a lot of ways.
So let's kind of back up a little bit. So values-based spending. So this is a concept that, for me, I first kind of learned of it through listening to the Frugal Friends podcast. I think it's a concept that they've kind of coined. And as I understand it, it's instead of thinking about your finances in terms of simply like saving or budgeting or maybe taking a prescribed budget app or something like that, it's about thinking about what is important to you as an individual and thinking about the kind of season of your life, and through thinking about those things, deciding yourself what is important for you to be spending on, what is important for you to not be spending on, and kind of figure out your kind of finances based on a really individual angle like that. Is that your kind of take on it?
Sure. And I think that the Frugal Friends are expressing some basic principles of microeconomics that we talk about, that every society, including an individual, a family, community, a state, a nation, these societies make decisions based on the values that they have, that they hold in common if they're more than one person. So when they talk about values-based spending, all of us are doing this already. That's how economics works. but they're asking you to drill it down and to concentrate on it. They're asking you to review your expenditures and consider how each one of them fits into your values. That's why I feel that their approach is innovative, because they're asking their followers to really account for and not just fall into their spending, but to really think about it. And I was happy with this concept. There's a local farmer here, again, back to the Central Vermont life. There's a farmer here called Alan LePage, and he's an organic farmer, and he used to be on the radio, he had his own radio talk show. And one thing he says is, okay, everybody says, it's great that you're doing organic farming. It's great that you're standing up for the environment and the planet. But when he looks at the percentage of sales in the local area, how many more dollars people are spending in conventionally produced produce than on his, he says, when you say you believe in organic farming, did you do what showed you believed in organic farming? And again, so just another way to say that, if consumers could think about their spending in the way that the Frugal Friends are suggesting, perhaps they could change toward going more toward Mr. LePage's idea, which is, did you put your money where your mouth was?
Yeah, brilliant. I knew you'd be able to describe it better than me. So you and I were discussing what we like. There is obviously so many applications to this idea in so many different areas of life in which you could really drill down and focus on what really is important to you and align your spending with that. And we were thinking, well, obviously, because we like to talk about textiles and sewing, what could that mean for our relationship with the materials and the resources that we need for our beloved pastimes?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I'd like to talk about Black Women Stitch podcast. And Lisa Wolfhook is the leader and founder and struggler to make it work. And they have just had the 200th podcast. And Lisa is calling for more people to support the Patreon. I have been putting out on my socials for a while. I got rid of the, what is it called? The Hulu. I got rid of the Netflix, and I gave that money, that monthly money, to Black Women Stitch. I am trying to put my money where my mouth is. I'm trying to spend on what supports my values. And my values are that communities can have self-determination to build their own sewing networks. So I'm giving my money to Black Women Stitch. Someone might say, well, no one forced you to get rid of the Netflix and the Hulu. But what are the values behind Netflix and Hulu? How does that make my life more what I want it to be? I didn't see it. I also send a small Patreon donation to yours as well.
And I'm very grateful.
Thank you. When thinking about sewing, I'm at this new house and I've just set up my sewing room, and I need to iron something. And the ironing board cover that I had scrounged thriftily from somewhere, it was a brand new cover. I know now why it was available for free, because it doesn't fit the standard ironing board. Here, I've got this ironing board, the cover doesn't fit. And then I started to research, where can I get a made in USA organic cotton ironing board cover? And I couldn't find any. And then I looked some more, and it seems that they're made in China. There is something made in Italy that has to be shipped from Italy, so you have to wait for it. So I'm going to have to make an ironing board cover, because my values don't include spending on the conventional cotton. And I already have cotton here. I have cotton padding. I have wool. I'm going to use wool for the padding. I have cotton canvas here. I have to make decisions by thinking through, at first, can I buy it when no one's selling what I need? What has the cotton that is with fair trade from the people that are, doing it, that are not being poisoned by their environment. And so here I am. I'm going to have to make an ironing board cover. And I'd really rather be making something fun, but here I am. And I think, does that happen for you, that you have to make some choices based on your values with the sewing and the purchasing?
All the time. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that is becoming more and more into focus. And I'm kind of seeing it. Sometimes it's frustrating. And I think, I just wish I was the kind of person that would just click on Amazon, and get it here tomorrow, because it definitely does take time. It sometimes is a bit more expensive, or often can be more expensive. But yeah, it's definitely something that I'm thinking more in terms of the fibers that I'm buying as well. Where do I want to put my money in terms of what's going to be left in the world when I'm gone, So similarly to you, I know that you are moving towards cotton thread. I'm also looking to go towards cotton thread, and I'm also looking to replace some of my cones of overlocking thread for tencel thread, because I recently tried that and I've been enjoying that. It's more expensive by quite a long way, but for me, I think that's something that I can do. And yeah, and it's like, where else? I mean, we are doing the Last Sewist Standing, so I haven't actually been spending any money apart from needles and thread since February. So that's money that I maybe would have been spending on fabric or patterns, that now, like, I could put that to replacing my overlocking threads with, with ones that they're going to biodegrade, and it's more aligned with my values. So I think that, yeah, having the concept of values-based spending clearer in my head, it's helping me to kind of think, no, actually, it's not an annoying thing that's getting in my way and it's kind of making me rack my brains. It's actually like, it's powerful. It's something that I can choose to do. And it is reminding me of what's the word? The agency that I have,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So about this replacing of polyester threads with cotton threads, I know that some of the people listening have already seen our discussions about this. In fact, I think that's how we first started to be in contact, that you had posted about what about cotton threads, and I wrote in and started seeing what I was doing. Now I'm changing this gradually. So that's why the navy thread available was only in cotton, because in my house, as a color gets finished, then I'm buying a cotton one from its place. I had thought about completely replacing them and just donating the polyester threads somewhere else. And I decided that that polyester would still be used somewhere. So that unless I was planning to throw it away and bury it, which is, again, exactly what we don't want, textiles in the landfill, that somebody would use it. So as I thought through what my values were around this, I decided to keep using the polyesters that I have. And again, each color is getting replaced gradually with cotton. The cotton is also so expensive. So by doing this more gradually, I don't know how much you were spending on fashions and notions since February, but by doing this more gradually, it's a less of a burden each time. And then I place my order with Wawak. No, I am still unbought and unbossed. I just happen to like Wawak. I place my order with Wawak every so often and get some of the things that are missing.
So who's that? What's that company? Wawak.
It's in the United States and Canada, WAWAK. So it's wawak.ca for Canada, wawak.com for the US. They have distribution places in both locations, and they send huge quantities. So you buy a kilometer of the thread for the same price as you might get 150 yards at your local fabric store.
Oh.
I support our local quilt store here in Central Vermont. They do sell cotton thread, but they don't sell it in the kind of quantities. I mean, I use this stuff by the cone. So that's how I'm doing this values-based spending.
It's not just about choosing what you spend your money, and it's also choosing who you're spending your money with as well, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's another aspect, because I know that there's a lot of people have certainly messaged me in terms of like the Last Sewist Standing, and they're like, oh, that's, it sounds really great. However, I want to support my local sewing shop. And I completely understand that, because obviously they do need support, because we live in a capitalist society and they will go under if we don't. But that is definitely an aspect as well. And I just think, like, well, if maybe everyone spent a little bit less money with the big chain stores and went more towards our local ones. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, and not everyone has the financial privilege to do that, because they are often a little bit more expensive. But that is a way that we can display our values through our spending as well, isn't it?
We also need to remember that our localities supported fabric and haberdashery and notion stores 2 generations ago. You would go on the streetcar in Detroit down to J.L. Hudson's or Woolworth's or something, and there were whole fabric sections and counters for that. And there were the notions accompanying, and there were specialist stores for these things. So to say I want to support my local store ignores the fact that somebody wasn't supporting your local store so much that it diminished to a small storefront instead of huge fabric stores. So we could support our local stores by returning to more sewing. Secondhand first. If we need something, let's see if we can get it secondhand. But our local stores would be a lot better off if 10% of us started shopping in stores. The Last Sewist Standing is not saying never shop for fabric again. It's saying for this time in your life, can you hold back from purchasing? Not all of us are at that time, so some of us are buying and some of us are not buying. I don't think that the local store should be damaged by that. However, I'm officially out of the Last Sewist Standing.
Okay, tell me.
After having made no purchases of fabric since, I believe, July of 2021, and no purchases of notions at least since halfway through 2022, I needed to buy something for these windows. I needed to buy insulated window liners for these windows. And I hate to say, it's made out of polyester around a piece of aluminum. It was really difficult to consider what this was made of. However, apparently some moisture or condensation can sometimes happen between these insulated layers and your window. And that if you don't use this insulating fabric, if you just choose to use wool and cotton, you can actually get damage to your wool and cotton, and they will not last as long.
Sure.
I'd really like not to have to go through this insulating experience again.
Yeah, I can't imagine it's much fun.
Well, they haven't even arrived yet, but every window has to have them. There are so many windows in the house, and you have to cut it precisely. You have to put magnets all around the edge and then magnets inside your window everywhere but at the bottom, so that when these shades are pulled down, they stick to the magnets and they create this extra, I believe, R4 of insulation. There's a way to measure how much heat transfer is taking place, and we use the R value. Right. So you want a higher R value. You want R60 in your roof, for example. You're only going to get R4 more out of installing these window things, but it's better than nothing, or better than whatever your windows were doing before you get R4 more out of it. People are also more comfortable around the windows. Windows can feel cold and drafty, especially older windows. You can buy professionally made insulating window shades. Well, you know I wasn't going to do that, girl. You know I was not going to have something made of textiles that I could, in fact, produce myself, that I was going to pay. You're paying $200 for a small window and upwards for the big window. Some of these windows would be $1,000 for insulation.
Wow.
And we're just not. Plus the windows themselves are expensive where we're replacing windows. So I'm out of the Last Sewist Standing, but I didn't buy any patterns, even when I was at the thrift shop and I saw some patterns. I said, even though I'm not in the Last Sewist Standing challenge anymore, it was so beneficial to me.
Brilliant. I was going to ask you
a little bit.
Yeah. Of course. No, I really want to know what kind of lasting impact that it's had on you, because you've been doing it for so long now.
So the Last Sewist Standing challenge, people entered into it for different reasons. And I entered to reduce the volume of sewing materials in my life. And the spending aspect, which some people really focused on as a financial question, I felt that my spending was in control in relation to my financial position. I was in no way harming our household or our future with my products. It's just that there were so many of them, and then there were more, and then there were more. And by doing this, I was able to say, how much do you really need? Then a reader going by the name of Fuzzy Galore also said, you can't just switch fabrics with your friend and think you've done. Like I was like, oh, well, I'll just give my friend some fabric and I'll just get some fabric from them. And then I'll have the experience of having new fabric. The follower said, you're not reducing your volume by doing that. Again, this goes back to the value-based spending. Here, my value was supposedly reducing the volume of fabric, but my action wasn't going to lead to that. So I was helpfully called in to that. Say there's still so much volume. So that's changed me. And the patterns. I've been re-evaluating how many patterns I have. I want to thank you again for the tip on going to the organizing on the Trello, on putting your patterns on Trello. I also can put on there whether it's in the Toronto house or the Vermont house. So it's very helpful to say, I don't need any more stinking patterns. The sections for tops, for bottoms, for home deck, for kids, for men's. Remember, we don't even have any kids. The sections for foot covering, for purses, all these things are really full. I don't need any more patterns, and I can draw a pattern if I want to.
Yeah, and you can easily adapt probably loads of what you've got into a number of more styles.
Since I know graph patterns, I could theoretically just go with the blocks. So these kinds of things have changed me so that I went to the thrift store. I didn't even sit down and go through the patterns. I just kept walking and didn't get involved in that. So I've really been changed by the Last Sewist Standing, and I hope to continue living by that. I don't know when the day will stop. If my friend had succeeded in buying thread for me, I guess I would have been thrown into the lightweight. But I'm going to continue.
No, you can buy thread. You can buy thread, can't you?
Yeah, but you can, so you still would be left in the heavyweight.
Yeah.
So I would still have been in the heavyweight except for those purchases. And I feel like I'm helping the environment by reducing the waste of energy out of my windows by making this.
Absolutely. That's a value in and of itself as well. You'll be reducing the amount of heat you need to be responsible for as well. So it's like when values and other values kind of trump other values, isn't it? You know?
And my husband brought up this conundrum today, but he said, you say you're an environmentalist, but you got 2 houses. And that has to be acknowledged, that we have 2 houses and there are people who need homes who don't have them. So we are trying to turn one of the houses at least into no fossil fuel needed. I've talked to you before about at least using solar panels on the Toronto house and being stymied, but we're not stymied here. We can put solar, and we're hoping to have geothermal heat pump and solar installed. So at least if you're the kind of people who have 2 houses, you don't have to be the kind of people where both of them are heated by fossil fuel. So there's a lot to be done differently to make the burden on the environment of having this second house. And so we're doing a lot of that, but acknowledging that there's still, by 2 of us having 2 houses, that's an average of 1 person per house density. And I know that sometimes people do live alone, but it still feels to us like we need to continue to do work to reduce the impact of having 2 houses.
Yeah, which you absolutely are doing. Can I just say back to the sewing spending again for a second? Mm-hmm. I went to the knitting and stitching show on Friday in London.
With your press badge?
With my press, I had my little wristband, yeah. But yeah, so I did go in and it was amazing. And I did actually give myself permission to buy some yarn if I saw some. But I actually didn't buy anything because they had some beautiful yarn, but not the right thickness and the right color that I was looking for. So I kind of almost feel like maybe I'm immune now, because it was like, if anywhere I was going to buy something nice, it was going to be there,
And those kind of stores or those kind of festivals, I was always more immune to. Where I was a sucker was for the sale price.
Oh, really?
And thinking, this yarn is only $2 instead of $10. Let's get it all. And I've really reduced that. I mean, I haven't been buying any yarn either in all these times. And there's only one brand of yarn that I do buy now instead of just these various random yarns. So there's still a lot. And when I went through my things that had been packed away in Michigan so that I could bring them to this house, I didn't realize I had so much. So I thought I was done. I thought I'd cataloged everything, but there's a lot of fabric. So when you see the pictures of my sewing room in the new house, you might say, why is it so full already? And that's because I had packed a lot of stuff away to be able to use, not knowing that I packed it, I guess. But I
Yeah.
found also a cache of some of my clothes that I haven't seen in a long time. I've talked before about sewing panties and that I had made 60 pairs of silk panties in, I think, 2007. And that I had just last year made a few bamboo jersey. But basically, I'm thinking I need to have a panty sewing day. So I found a pair of those silk panties that hadn't been worn since the 2007. And then they're just, the color is just so brilliant and so beautiful compared to the ones that have been being worn and being washed for, is that 15 years? It's more than 15 years. I'm saying, I know I don't need any more, but I will look forward to when I'll have a whole batch of new and fresh and shiny ones as well.
Yeah. There is a dichotomy, isn't there, between you want to make something, you want that enjoyment, and you want to have the thing as well. And it's like, do I need it? And I feel that is something like almost like values-based making,
You're hitting on something there. And I think we've talked about it, and you've talked about it with some of your other podcast guests as well. When you're making something, do you need that something? Is there another way to get that something? Like underpants, usually there isn't. Usually you don't want the thrifted undies, although I wear my aunt's undies and my cousin says she wears some of auntie's undies too. But usually you won't. So you could always say, for that, at least I'll make it. But for another t-shirt, t-shirts are everywhere. T-shirts are being given away for free at so many events. I think we should talk about whether every doggone event needs a t-shirt, but t-shirts are everywhere. When I want a t-shirt, I found them either free or for 25 cents at a yard sale or thrift shop. Just to say, do I need to make a t-shirt? No, I do not need to make a t-shirt because in my life, t-shirts come in that. Today, I found this. I didn't remember having it. It's got a cute little flower.
Oh.
Yeah, it's so cute. And I'm thinking, oh, I could just make a little camisole out of it. Then I said, girl, you have enough camisole. So I wrote my friend and said, can we make something for your daughter so that it doesn't have to be made for me? Her daughter is growing. She always needs clothes. So we can use it and I can have the fun of making a little something, whatever it is the daughter chooses, without more stuff having to belong to me.
Yeah.
And I can have a fun afternoon with my friend, sharing and making something together, which is it, historically, a lot of times women would gather together to make things together. And that was a way that they socialized by doing their lace work, by doing their quilting, doing their clothing making. You could socialize and you can be productive. So I'm trying to find alternative ways to making every doggone thing.
Yeah, that's a really nice idea, especially when you do have a lot of fabric and you think, well, I want to put it to use, but yeah, maybe I don't need another X thing. You also then just touched on something else that we were discussing via Instagram. The idea of if you are using a secondhand garment or a secondhand item, sometimes the relationship that you have with the previous owner affects whether or not it's something that you would feel comfortable wearing. Because I think we were discussing about shoes, I think was
the
gateway into that. Because you draw your line, wasn't it? That was what we were talking about.
Right. And it's so funny how the people draw their line. So I don't wear shoes from anyone. I was taught never to wear shoes from anyone. I don't even wear my husband's shoes, even though they're the same size. But I do definitely wear the panties from my aunt. I wear anything else from anyone. But I wouldn't wear panties, I think, from somebody that I wasn't very close to. Which makes no sense. Once they're washed, they're just as washed, whether they're from your blood relative or from.
I agree.
And my husband also, he goes further than that. He won't wear socks from people. He won't wear long underwear. He won't wear pajamas. He does wear my father's pajamas now because one day his pajamas were in the wash and he was saying, my pajamas, they're not dry. And I said, look, I don't have time to make you any more pajamas. You better put on that pair that's here from daddy. And he put it on and he liked it. So sometimes I see him wearing it when it's not because he doesn't have any clean ones. But beyond that, he won't wear anybody's pajamas. So he has a longer list of what he won't wear from people.
Interesting. I've just been doing some research. I'm making an episode on Halloween coming up, and I've been finding out some really concerning, obviously, statistics around costumes, like Halloween costumes and stuff, and how the vast majority of people in families in the UK will be buying new costumes. But how I can't remember the statistic off the top of my head, but there is a sizable proportion of people that would consider wearing a second-hand costume if it was from a friend or family member. So that is really interesting. And that is something that we could maybe harness in some way. And maybe instead of going to people, oh, just get things on Vinted or Facebook Marketplace, if they're not feeling comfortable with that, well, okay, well, what can we do? How can we make a situation where maybe we come up with we have some swapping things between friends or between like a class at school, or, I was thinking about in terms of that.
And the idea that these inanimate objects somehow convey, they kind of have a little degree of animation in that you would accept a costume from a friend or relative, but not from a stranger, when theoretically it's just as distant from you. But you feel that there's something in that. And I think that anthropologically, we may want to explore this more as a society. I have a socket wrench box that's here at the house, and it was my dad's socket wrench box. And it's full of these socket wrenches. I almost never, I mean, once in 10 years, need to use a wrench from that. But it was dad's box. So I keep it, and there isn't actually a practical need, but it feels as if it has something of my father with it. And when you're wearing a costume from your friend or relative versus a costume from a stranger, I think people may be feeling that little bit of spirit that they imbue. I'm not saying that there's actually spirit in the costume.
Yeah.
Now, growing up, I enjoyed using elements that were already in my house to make costumes. And I think once or twice my mother bought us a costume for 25 cents at somebody's yard sale. But mostly we were making the costumes. And I remember one year I was now a young adult. I decided to go as God's gift to men. So I made up a cardboard box and wrapped it in wrapping paper and got all these labels that say, to so-and-so, to Matt from God, to Rick from God, to Tim, to Pat, to all these men. And I just decided that I would be God's gift to men that year. And by the way, the men of Detroit did not respond in the way that I wanted. They did not think that I was God's gift to them. Fortunately enough, I later found somebody who does think I'm God's gift to him. But at one time I was Indira Gandhi, and I had a sari, and I had some powder in my hair for the part with the white hair. Also, I think there's an increasing call for costume makers to think about what happens if you're making a costume from someone who doesn't share your cultural background, and what are some of the guidelines around it. And for example, when I made this costume, I didn't also incorporate anything that would be religious in nature from a religion that I'm in. I just put powder in the hair and put on a sari that I already owned. And I think it's important also, some people still have to hear this. You're not to paint your face in a different color to represent that the person you're doing is from another color than you. Whether or not you're the exact same color as the person isn't the point. The point is that you're trying to embody them. And as much as possible, you should be representing a specific person. You don't just I'm going to dress up as an English person, but I'm going to dress up like Zoe Edwards, which actually sounds like a good, that sounds like a good Halloween costume.
Just a pair of dungarees and a brown fringe, you've done.
Yeah. I'll have to work on the fringe. I think I've got some wigs around here. But not just in general, some stereotype of what it means to be English. which I understand there are many, many different ways to be English, but instead to identify a specific person.
Sure.
Because we don't want to be hurtful as we're enjoying these Halloween celebrations with our friends and relatives.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hopefully everyone who listens to this podcast has got on board with that.
I don't know that everybody is as particular as what I'm saying about remembering to choose specific people rather than to choose a nationality or an ethnicity.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I think the English are still fair game for lots of joking and stuff. I don't mean they should be, but I think that the English are people too. You guys get to not be reduced to one stereotype as well. And it's not just groups that are historically downtrodden, but also some of the treaders upon also need to be recognized that there are many ways to be British.
Yeah.
Or English in this case.
Good point. So should we get back to your house? Because I'm really interested in all the many ways that you are applying your values-based spending. So you've got the blinds. There's been layers of values that you've been applying to that. And unfortunately, it meant that Last Sewist Standing had to slip away because it was trumped by some other values. What about the rest of your, because I understand that you're trying to keep as many of the original materials as possible in your home. Is that right?
That's right. So one of the biggest things is something you won't see when you come inside, which is the energy audit.
Right.
So we had the professional scheduled to come out for the energy audit, and he produced a detailed audit of exactly what you should do to get the most bang for your buck in reducing the heat loss from the home. And that includes the attic, there were a few windows and doors that he identified as immediate problems. There are also insulation in the basement. There are fans, when you have a shower fan or a kitchen fan, there were fans going out. In one case, you could see the outdoors. You could see the outdoors through the wall. It didn't have the flat that it's supposed to have, and it wasn't done efficiently. In another case, the case of one of the doors, it had been lovingly constructed some generations ago, apparently as a barn door. But you can see the daylight through the cracks. And so that's being replaced as well. I think most of the things we were already doing, such as replace things with LED bulbs and LED fixtures. So we're busy doing all of those. And again, hopeful to go to geothermal and solar. I was excited. I thought we could go thermal right away. And I sent off for quotes. But until you reduce the amount of expenditure in terms of how much heat is going out, your system that they have to quote you for your existing conditions has to be very, very extensive. Okay. So if you reduce the size first, then if you reduce the heat use first, you can reduce the size of your systems. There are also cosmetic things that I don't like about the house. And this is something that I think you were alluding to in your question. I certainly posted about this, that there are some things about the house whose appearance I don't prefer. I do not believe it's environmentally sound to tear down things that are correctly functioning just because you don't like the way they look. Sure, a little bit here and there, a shelf that you don't prefer, but I think a complete kitchen or bathroom renovation, the money that it costs you is a signal for you to think twice. Going back to the value-based spending, a kitchen renovation, the kitchen this size is probably $50,000 US for your readers who may be, or listeners who may be in different currency zones. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the kitchen. The kitchen is functioning. There was a grill and a stovetop that were on propane. I told you we're trying to get away from fossil fuels, so we took those away and are putting in electric for the stove and just a butcher block top for the grill. Why we need a grill and a stove, we don't know. But I wouldn't have chosen this look of the kitchen. However, I'm going to live with it. Painting a few cabinets, we're replacing a range hood with a range hood that is energy efficient. So it could come down. I thought it was ugly, but it came down because there was an energy benefit to doing as well. And all around the house, I'm doing the same thing. If there's something already Why are we sending it to the landfill unless it's just appalling? And are there other ways to give things away? They had interior shutters going halfway up, I think 8 of the windows. And they weren't the kind that could help you get any kind of energy benefit. They just would prevent people from looking in. I didn't prefer those. So we took them down, we wrapped them up neatly, and we took them to a local resource, which is a store that gives building materials a chance at a new life. And it will sell your good condition building materials, be they cabinets, shelves, whole kitchens, everything like that. They also resell washers and dryers and things that people have donated. They have a repair class so young people can learn how to be repair technicians, and then they sell them. So when I didn't want the shutters, they went to the resource. So that is the kind of thing that I believe is using our values, which is keeping things out of the landfill, not necessarily textiles, but those textiles too that I find in the house that I don't have a use for. I've been either remaking, upcycling, or giving away for people who can use them. But in general, and I know you'll probably agree with me, Zoe, because you're such a brilliant thinker, when you move house, there's a lot of pressure to make it like the magazines and HGTV, and I don't even know what else, to make it look like a show place in the modern sense. And this kitchen that I don't like was a show place in the 1990s. And you would look in the Architectural Digest and you would see these cabinets and you would see this kitchen style that was just the dream. I believe that pressure should be resisted. I believe it leads to replacing things that don't need replacing. I believe if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That these kinds of approaches, you buy a new house, so you rip out everything, are harmful for the environment.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think we should disengage from all these kinds of programs that we're watching that would make us think that we should do that.
Yeah. I don't know where the notions come from, but yeah, it definitely is in the UK, or at least the people that I kind of tend to speak to. The idea is that when you move, you change the bathroom and the kitchen. That's just like an accepted thing that you will then do once you moved, to kind of almost put your stamp on it. Like, this is mine. It's like, I know it's yours. You live there, Do you really need to have chosen the specific shape of sink? Does your personality have to be represented in your shape of sink,
Right. You want to be an individual, but before the days of social media, you would only be showing your house to your guests that happen to come. Maybe your coworkers would enjoy seeing some photos of your new house, but mostly only your near and dear ones would see that renovation. Now there's this desire to keep up with the Joneses and the Ramirezes and the Wongs and the Patels, that you don't just try to keep up with the neighbors whose houses you visit, but everybody, because you see everybody's. And I'm hoping that when people are seeing the pictures and the stories that I'm talking about in my renovation, that they'll see that, at least in my life, it's okay to make only minimal changes to get a desired outcome. This sewing room, for example, I'm talking to you from inside my new sewing room. It didn't have any lights at all. And the walls had been dark burgundy. So I had it painted. I did some of the painting, but the rest of it I hired out, had it painted. I had lights put in, ceiling fan and lights, and I had an electric outlet put in the floor for the iron. And okay, I believe you guys say Bob's your uncle. Is this the time
Bob's
to say
your
Bob's your uncle? There I was with a functional sewing room, and the cost of, if you were going to do it yourself, just the cost of the paint and a few $100 to the electricians. I also found a table, a good size for a sewing table, out in the garage. It didn't have legs on it. Okay, we put legs on it. Now I've got a sewing table. You don't have to spend a lot to have a nice sewing room. You don't have to spend a lot to have a nice kitchen in some cases. I also would like to show that you can have the money to replace everything, but just don't.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that's a really good point. Yeah. because when we moved about 2 years ago, and the only thing that we've done to the decor is we painted one wall in the lounge. And when people came around, they go, "Oh, we like your kitchen." And I was really at pains to say, I didn't have anything to do with this kitchen. Like, I'm really lucky that it's a lovely kitchen. But I know what, and I wonder what I was trying to signal with that. I wonder if it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I hope that I was perpetuating the idea that you don't have to replace a kitchen. I think I also wanted to perpetuate the idea that, like, I don't have this good taste. Like, my kitchen would look terrible because I've never had to. No, it wouldn't look terrible. It'd be fine, but it'd probably be probably a bit cheaper than the one that they put in. Because, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing, isn't it? I think that if you've rented pretty much your whole life until 2 years ago, I've never had to choose a kitchen before, and I don't know what my personality as a kitchen would look like. But yeah, but equally as interested as I would be potentially to find out what my personality in kitchen form would be, I don't have to find out, or at least until it needs replacing because there's like been a leak or the doors are hanging off or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to normalize, and we use the word normalize a little bit more than necessary, but we need to accept as a community that this planet is getting hotter. And the only way to change it is if each of us makes choices to reduce it. Each of us saying, my kitchen's fine. Each of us saying, I don't need an addition. Already, we've been tearing some stuff off of this house. We tore down a deck that was dangerous, and we are not going to replace it. Instead, we're changing out the door to a window. We're changing and taking away things that are unnecessary rather than adding anything, which in this house isn't, you don't want to add anything.
So I'm just saying, your face looks gorgeous. It looks really fresh. It looks really light filled and lovely.
Thank you.
Sustainability can sometimes be a bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's about, and I think this was something that when I was speaking to the crap activist, he was saying as well, like, sometimes it's about just what you're not doing, isn't it? Rather than, right, what do I need to do to live more sustainably? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. It's, if I don't go to the store to buy something, for example, a television, we don't have a television. My mother, Mom, if you're listening, I'm telling your business on the internet. My mother was invited to come visit me, and she said, but you don't have a television. And she says, maybe you should think about getting a television. My mother and I have had this thing about televisions. I haven't had a television since my early 20s. One time my parents came to my house with a television as a gift, and I made them take it away with them. I don't choose to have a television. My husband also doesn't choose to have a television. We made those choices long before we met each other. So we don't have a television. We don't have to have space for a television in our decor. We don't have to pay a cable bill. Also, these televisions that are in this instant on, they're always having a parasitical effect on your electricity as well. Yeah. It's simpler. You don't have to do any of it. It's just not there in your life. Christmas presents. I am not caught in the Christmas present shopping, nor did I transfer to the Eid buying shopping. If I want to give someone a gift, I know how to make one, or I know how to order one from a local maker and have it delivered to their house by hand if I need to. I'm not down there in the crush. I also want to go back a little bit to the energy efficiency and how we can make our homes more efficient. The easiest and quickest thing that many people can do is to unplug and don't use anymore their electric dryer.
Yes.
I understand that in many countries, and I've seen that in most countries in the world, electric dryer is a joke anyway. That they don't use an electric dryer, they hang their clothes to dry. The air is free. Now, I know in some of the places y'all have over there in the north of England, there's a thing they call damp in their house. And
not just in the north.
It's not just in the north. Okay, so that they may have more difficulty, but somehow they still don't seem to resort to using electric clothes dryer.
I think that it's becoming more and more, unfortunately, is becoming more and more normalized. And I wonder if there's how much that is to do with the fact that we see it on TV and film and stuff from the US. But also I think that as places are being built new. Like there's a lot of
Mhm.
flats being built across the UK, and especially in the southeast at the moment. They are installing, because there isn't any outside space, they're installing dryers as kind of standard, where previously a lot of us didn't grow up with them. So I do think sadly that there are,
Mhm.
but then I wonder if people, because the price of fuel has gone up so much recently, I wonder if people are then maybe reverting to not using it again. Is the motivator financial rather than environmental? And I guess whatever it is, if it's happening, people are not using them, then that's positive. But
I mean, prices are always a signal. Going back to that economics, I taught economics, I love economics. Prices are a signal to the consumer to consume less of it, and a signal to the producer to produce more of it, or some producers even to enter and start producing it. So if the prices of electricity or natural gas or whatever you're using to fuel your dryer increase, then you will use less of that substance, either with your dryer, with your television, with whatever other you're using it with, because it signals you stop. And the signal, not all consumers are the same, and some have different incomes. So the signal will affect them in different ways. But I've heard people over there in Europe saying things like their bill to heat their house doubled or tripled last winter.
yeah, absolutely.
So that was a signal to them to lower the temperature of their house, to wear more warm clothes. It still sometimes wasn't enough, that all that signaling left some people without a warm enough house in the winter. They might have
There's a lot
turned
of
the heat.
people, yeah, there was a lot of people that had to choose food or heat.
So we have to do something as a society, one of these things being winterized homes, so that as a community we're using less. The price would normally decrease for this, and then there will be more access for those who don't have it. You can also have other solutions as a society. You can have energy subsidies for people for a bare basics amount. I would like to also continue to be a participant in these kinds of changes happening locally. Here, I'd like to talk about the FIRE lifestyle. These are the people that they call it financial independence, retire early, or FIRE. And
Oh,
these are people who, not for reasons of sustainability, but overlap with the sustainability mindset, they try to use as little of their income as possible every year so
oh,
that they can retire early. Sometimes there's criticism because some of those who have been most vocal in promoting FIRE are people who had a high income in the first place. So
right.
telling them reduce your spending and save, and then you can retire early, it's a whole lot easier, obviously, the higher your salary is. But some tips can be taken from those in that they try to consume as little as possible so they'll have more resources and they can retire. And when you retire relatively young, you're not as tired on average. So these kinds of things that we've been mentioning, these volunteer programs, volunteering in many countries is often only the old or mostly the old. If we can get people consuming less so that they can retire earlier, they are more available for volunteering for these types of programs. Yes, they should be subsidized by governments and so on. But also, these people can do their life energy in a way that makes it happier for them. They're volunteering at repair cafes. There are things like that. They're not at some job. Your job seems to be a nice one at Fabric Godmother, but many jobs are doing things that the people don't like.
Mm,
How much better if they could retire and volunteer in things that they do like and have income
mm.
that will make their life okay in the meantime. I think as we're talking, I see this as an ecology of non consumption, an ecology of sharing, that one part of it is not enough. And I'm glad that you've got this podcast out here to try to talk to people. And I've on my webpage or on my Instagram, I'm trying to talk to people about these things. I'd like to see more of an infrastructure that is sustainable. And as we've said, usually the sustainable choice is even easier and it's you money anyway. Just an ecology of sustainability, I guess, an ecology of let's use less stuff, allow people who are, by the way, living longer and longer, allow people to spend more of their time in pursuits that are sustainable to them. These 26 apple trees, I have no time for that. But another person might be able to make apple butter and canned applesauce and dried apples and things like that if she wasn't tied up in taking care of her kids by herself, or he in taking care of his or their kids by themselves, and taking care of their kids and trying to go buy Halloween costumes and Christmas presents and other stuff that I think once talked about it being a lot of plastic tack. If they were able to access resources, there are programs in a lot of cities that could be expanded where you can glean from someone's tree and you can share half of the harvest with them. There are projects like this that could be expanded. But first, the people are time poor because of all of the pressures that are on them. And going back to clothes, when I pulled out this bag of clothes that had been stored for 10 years that I hadn't seen, I still like those clothes. They were made in styles and fashions that were perfectly fine today as they were 10 years ago. I don't know. And I think many people's wardrobes that they sew themselves are made of timeless clothes. Or they've cultivated their own personal style in such a way that it works for them timelessly.
Yeah.
But I think your bought clothes from 10 years ago might not be as appropriate in jobs or in public spheres that are not these super left corners. If you see where I'm going.
I absolutely do. And I kind of feel like that's why I really kind of bang on a lot about cultivating or really acknowledging your personal style, because if you're making clothes that really sing to you, whatever that is, then you're going to feel more connected with them, and you're going to see them 10 years later and go, oh yeah, that's great. I mean, there's a lot of connection to do with, the physically producing the thing, but also, I think stylistically, like if you can still really resonate with something, then why wouldn't you wear it again? And there is ways you could maybe slightly update it or alter it if you want to. That's the superpower of sewing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We can sew more sustainably when we sew things that appeal to us, as you talked about in your different podcasts. And most recently, you were talking with the lady about creativity in sewing and self-expression in sewing. I definitely feel that my wardrobe expresses my creativity as a human being and my international outlook. So today I'm wearing a kaftan that I made in the US because I had a small piece of this lovely silk in a plaid. And so I added those. And I was thinking about what kaftan I want to make and how I want to do that. But this kaftan, I don't even remember what year I made it. Does everybody around wear kaftans? No, but I wear kaftans and I like these kaftans just as well. Just one side note. When I was teaching in Canada before, close to retiring, they had a little get together to thank parents who had worked so hard in the Parent Teacher Association, had them come into the school, gave them a little speech, gave them snacks and were nice to them. And they invited staff members who, if they were on their prep time, to come in there. So I went in there and thanked the parents and talked to them. And in Canada, especially in Southern Ontario, it's very international. So you shouldn't necessarily assume that the person you're speaking to was born in Canada. Especially in Toronto, there could be a 50% chance that they weren't born in Canada. So one of the parents was asking me, so where are you from? I said, I'm American. They said, you're American? I said, yeah, it's right next door. Where are you from? They said, well, I was born in Trinidad, but I never assumed that you were American. I said, well, why not? They said, Americans don't dress like you.
Oh, interesting.
So I polled a couple of classrooms when I was visiting other teachers' classrooms. Where do you think I'm from? And kids were answering all over the map. None of them on the right continent. None of them even on the right continent if you had North and South America. Kids said, well, obviously you come from the East. And they were very tolerant of my style of dress. But they thought that it was dressed from my quote unquote homeland, whatever that was. But nobody could tell what it was because it changed. So the clothing styles change. I never intended to be confusing to people. I thought being an American, like I talked about earlier, being a British person, there's a lot of different ways to be one. But the parent to say to me, you know, Americans don't dress like that. Well, this one does.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. So how did it make you feel then?
I was amused that everybody was very tolerant of it and everybody's very respectful of you doing your thing from your culture. And that's much taught in those schools as well. So we respect everybody but the idea that we respect everyone so much that we make assumptions. We always make assumptions, but we make assumptions. And then those assumptions just have nothing to do with the truth. That a lot of American Muslims, especially, but I was a widely variant dresser even before becoming a Muslim. But a lot of American Muslims, because we don't have, and I've mentioned to you before, we don't have a national dress as Americans anyway, jeans and a jean jacket, some people say, but we really don't have a traditional dress. American Muslims often will wear clothes from other Muslim cultures or clothes that we design. So I designed this kaftan for our American Muslim lifestyle.
It just reminds you, doesn't it, how signifying clothing is, even if the signals are not accurate.
Right. That's exactly. You are sending messages with the clothing you wear and everything you're doing, whether or not you're intending and whether or not they're received correctly by the thing. What would you like your clothes to say about you, Zoe?
Oh, good question. Oh, well, you put me on the spot there. I guess.
If it's not time, we don't have to do it
No,
now.
no, no. I like this. I like this. I feel that I would like that there was some of my values expressed in my clothing. I've always tended to be more the person that, and I think this probably comes across in what I wear, more interested in what my friends think of me than what I'm projecting to the opposite sex, because I'm in a heterosexual relationship. I guess if I had to label my style, it's kind of like art teacher. A lot of like boiler suits and dungarees. If I'm wearing a dress, it tends to be like a pinafore. It's kind of comfortable. So what is an art? I guess somebody who, values creativity, values comfort, isn't necessarily interested in the social trend, but I am interested in social trends, but I'm not necessarily interested in adopting them myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And your point about the opposite sex, I definitely feel that my clothing is not made for the male gaze.
That's it. That's what I wanted to say. Yes.
That the male gaze has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Even when I was younger, I rarely was thinking about the male gaze, which I now say ironic because I married a male whose gaze doesn't exist and he's a blind person.
Oh, yeah.
But I never was trying to say to the men, come get this. Except I made that Halloween costume with it. But or another time I put books out on the walk by my house or on the little green space by my house. I hoped that I could catch a man by baiting it like you bait for deer with salt. So I figured I could catch an intellectual by putting a whole bunch of books out there. And that time one guy did bite and I went on a couple dates with him. But the book that he had chosen wasn't my own book. It was my sister's book that I had just added in that day. And it turned out he would have been more suited for my sister. And he didn't take up with my sister, but he took up with another friend of mine. So my baiting, I also have to remember, if I ever advise anybody about this again, bait only with your own interests in books. But dressing for the male gaze wasn't something that I ever pursued. And, I had some years of wearing hijab and leading a hijab lifestyle. I don't lead a hijab lifestyle anymore, but I still wear mostly covered up clothes. I don't only feel I have to wear caftans. I might be wearing trousers, or as you put it, dungarees, we call it overalls. I might be wearing some of those things too, or dresses and blouses, but I rarely will have my lower legs, showing. Knees is very infrequent. And I'd like for people to say when they see me, that lady respects herself, that lady is proud of herself and her family and her background, and that she thinks about her body as something that she's not sharing with everybody. I would like that message to come across. I
Right.
also do have a gendered presentation, that my clothes are women's clothes. In only a few cases would my clothes also be comfortable for the majority of men in the society, in the American society, or in the Muslim society, that I wear women's clothes. And I think of myself as a lady or a woman. And I was taught as a child to carry a purse. I continue to carry a purse. And instead of having a wallet in a pocket, and this whole thing about ladylike, I may not always wear a bra. In fact, I probably almost never wear a bra, but by God, I'm wearing a slip. And that those are part of my ideas about what I'd like to present as well.
Interesting. Interesting. And yeah, I mean, what women are meant to wear has changed so rapidly in a short succession of generations, hasn't it, really?
You said what women are meant to wear. So there's items that I think are considered required by everyone, and then there are items that are considered optional. So a bra is still mostly considered required.
Mm.
I don't like these bras. I never liked them. When I was a kid, I tried to escape the bra wearing, and my mother would check my shoulder before I went to school. You know, she'd be in the bed, and I would go to school, and I would have to pull over and show her that I was wearing the bra because I didn't want to wear the bra even then. So I got smart and I started using a ribbon, and I'd have a little ribbon under my blouse. And my mother was half asleep and she wouldn't have her glasses on. I'm like, look, I'm wearing the bra. She said, good girl, you can go to school now. And then when I came home, I would run into the bedroom and change my top and say that I had changed out of the bra. And well, one time she caught me, and she had cleaned the room while I was at school, and she found the bra, and it obviously wasn't on me. So she enforced this social expectation of wearing bras. But once I was freed of my mother's rules, I stopped wearing bras so often and close to almost never, so that we didn't even have a bra for the wedding. We had to buy a bra because the few bras that I owned weren't here.
So obviously it was a conscious decision to stop wearing bras. Did you feel conflicted in that you felt like, oh, there's that expectation from your mum? Was it a difficult decision to make in that sense then, in that you're like, oh, it was always important to her, but I'm choosing not to?
Um, well, I do wear a bra for sports activities, so I do have a sports bra. But what I thought as a child versus what I thought as a young person versus what I thought today. As a child, I thought this is unfair to tell me that just because I'm developing these breasts, that I have to wear this garment that I don't like, that's uncomfortable. I think as an adult, I was more clear on the fact that not wearing a bra signals to some people that you're a leftist feminist, in my case, true. It might signal that you don't care about convention. Okay, also true. But I also think I return to the thing that, why are you saying that just because I have breasts, I have to confine them in this bra? And I don't want to. But I understand that that is, in this culture, a common expectation that a woman would use a bra to control, perhaps support, if that's the idea, to mold. Some people, Zoe, they insert false materials inside of the bra. I mean, you can buy the bra, it's already padded, or you can stuff it with something. I'm like, y'all kidding, right? But some people, they think that that's valuable to them too, and it might enhance. Again, we're going back maybe to the male gaze, or maybe, I know there's a lady who posts on Instagram a lot. Her name is Raven Reveals, and she's a Black Jew, and she dances. And a lot of lesbians enjoy watching her dance. Not just I enjoy it because she's so happy as she dances, but a lot of lesbians also enjoy it for like a sexual reason. It isn't just the male gaze that someone could be trying to attract. I think that my clothing is more not what women are meant to or supposed to wear, but clothing that shows a woman gender marker more than it necessarily is. Because I think there's only a few items. You are supposed to wear a bra in this society. I don't think you're supposed to wear a caftan. But a caftan made like this and with this detail in the sleeves, men wear caftans. But if you wear this kind of a caftan, you would be a woman person in this society. Yeah. I feel that you wear some more clothes that more of your wardrobe could be worn by people who in our society would be viewed as men in my country. I think you have more clothes that could be either than
Possibly.
I do.
Possibly, yeah. Definitely wore my boiler suit for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so over feeling uncomfortable, and that
Mm-hmm.
is, it's just not something I want to do anymore. And it's something I've spoken about on the podcast before. Like, I get incredibly bloated if I have anything restricting my belly, even jeans, even
Mm-hmm.
stretchy jeans. Now I can't wear them all day. I can barely wear them half a day. I can't wait to take them off. I feel like when I was growing up, maybe there was a little bit more male gaze aspect to my clothing, but not, it was still more like, what are my friends going to think? I feel. And what am I signaling about what kind of like music I'm into, or what kind of interests I have, what my kind of political views are. Like, I am a bit more kind of alternative, was something that I very much identified as a kind of teenager in my early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big signal with what I was wearing. And I guess now that is just, I guess I'm still signaling that with my clothing. It's interesting. I've recently made friends with a lovely woman who I really respect so, so much. And her presentation of self is very much the opposite. It's very body conscious clothing. It's very, what I would assume is more for the male gaze. And I'm really enjoying having this lovely friendship with this woman who is exhibiting a different form of femininity to myself, and finding the ways where we connect and have a deep respect for each other. So I think she looks wonderful. She compliments me on my boiler suit.
I guess I'd like to have a little bit of a conclusion to my talk about finding my clothes that I didn't remember I had. It's like having a wardrobe surprise. And I think you've talked about that before, but I think I'm going to put some things away, a selection of my things, not necessarily new this year, just a few of my things. I'm going to put them away for a future time. And I might even mark the box with what year I put it away in. I wonder if I'll get this same feeling of, I like that. I made that. Oh, that's cute. And then some things that I look at and I say, that trim that's on there, it's no longer my style. I can take that away. I could alter these garments, but almost all of them, I can just wear them as is. And although I'm smaller than I was, and we've talked about that, a lot of the folk clothes that I wear don't matter if you're smaller or bigger within a certain range. Okay, great. Let's just enjoy those. So I think I'm going to have myself a little time capsule of that.
I love that. So when you found those garments that you'd put away 10 years ago, was it a little bit like a window into who was I 10 years ago? Was there some memories in that, with like, oh, I really remember wearing that garment at that time,
Mm.
how I was feeling at that time?
I remember
Right.
the making of the garments and how I felt about them, where I got the fabrics, what patterns I use for the most part, the memories, I think, more connected to the creation of than thinking of specific incidents that I used.
Interesting. Are there any garments you've got and you don't remember making them?
No, but there was a tablecloth that I saw at my mom's house. So, oh, this is a lovely tablecloth. This is great. She said, you made that.
Oh,
Yeah. Like I had embroidered on it. I was like, oh, this is really great. Yeah, you did that. So I guess it didn't live with me long enough. As soon as I made it, I sent it away.
yeah. I think I definitely have a connection when I see each of my garments. I can remember the thought process and my hopes for that garment, and what I hoped it was going to look good with, and how I hoped I was going to feel in it. I think I do have that attachment to each of them as well.
I've got some silk velvet here.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's so beautiful for the autumn colors, that I'm seeing outside.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a caftan out of this silk velvet, and I'm enjoying thinking about other caftans that I've made over the years, how I want to make this work for me, what's my design and plan. But I think this will be great. I usually don't wear these colors, but in the autumn, I also look at myself and I just feel like I look so pale next to these colors that it might need a really dramatic head wrap and maybe some earrings or something to really help it not look so pale. And I'm sure you're saying, you don't actually look that pale to me, Shams, compared to you. I look pale to myself, which is, it's funny. We talk about our images we always send out. I see myself as a Black person, and all the colors that Black people can be are part of my identity, of my thinking of myself as a Black person. And so as Black people go, I'm kind of pale.
Right.
And so I feel pale to myself when I look at that against my face. Whereas wearing a pale color like here, a pale purple against my face, I don't feel as pale. I used to want to be more authentically brown, whatever that. Right. And I wanted to be more even commandingly brown, and to have Afro hair that when you press it, it stays pressed, or that when you put it into braids or dreadlocks, it does that. But that's not what I have. It's not the body I have. It's not the skin and the hair that I have. I have this coloring. This is the legacy of slavery and the legacy of rape of some of our ancestors. That's the color I have. I longed for being more brown.
Did you use wear certain colors to kind of, as you were saying, like to accentuate your coloring?
I would try not to wear clothes that made me look too pale, and even now I would do that. But no, I wanted to wear the hairstyles like my sister and the other girls. And also, like, when you're brown and you put the lotion on, or your parents would put the Vaseline on your face. I don't know if they put the Vaseline on your face growing up, but they would put the Vaseline on your face. And my skin doesn't shine like that. My arms, they don't have that healthy brown color. They're brown, but very pale. So I would have liked to have been, when I say more authentically, sometimes people have challenged me and said, you're not really Black, to which I object. To Black parents, you don't get to decide for me whether I'm Black. My Blackness is something that belongs to me and to my community. But I have felt to not have the authentic coloration of what I think of as a Black. There's a wide array, but I have felt that if you were darker, you'd be more authentic. I had to come with, this is the Black I am.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you are very beautiful, and I can't wait to see you in that amazing caftan. It's going to look so stunning. Is that next up on your sewing table?
Yeah, that's really on my mind right now, and I don't know what shape I'm cutting it into, but I plan to cut it soon.
Exciting. I cannot wait. I've taken up so much of your time. I love speaking to you so much, and I'm so grateful.
I really enjoy talking with you too, Zoe, and keeping up together on the Instagram and everything. Yeah, I'm always watching these, and even if I'm not making a lot of words about them, I'm always looking at them to see, what decisions was Zoe going through as she was making this. I also like where you make things out of scraps. And even though I don't want to make the things out of scraps, I like reading about all your careful work.
Thank you. Thank you. More scrap projects are coming.
Because you're staying in Last Sewist Standing, right? You're not getting out.
I'm not getting out. I feel like if I manage to do the knitting and stitching show, and I've got 2/3 of the way there, and I work in a fabric shop, like, surely at this point, like, I can't
make it stand.
I'm staying. I'll do what I need to.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions, or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support. to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!